The Cornetto trilogy are three of my favourite films of all time. Now, what is the Cornetto trilogy? It's the movies Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. All three are directed by Edgar Wright and are written by both Wright and the co-lead in all three, Simon Pegg. These three films have been called the Cornetto trilogy because each of them includes a Cornetto ice cream, and that, honestly, is probably the strongest link between the three of them. Whilst each share a similar style of British comedy, they are three very distinct and different films, with Shaun of the Dead being a zombie movie, Hot Fuzz being a British take on a police action thriller, and The World's End being an alien invasion at the end of the world story. There's an awful lot to love about these movies. So this video is going to be the first in a three-part series where I break down each of the films in the Cornetto trilogy. I'll examine the themes, ideas, and some of the filmmaking techniques involved, as well as sprinkling in some cool behind-the-scenes facts that I've come across whilst researching these three films for this three-part series. As always, please do remember to like and subscribe, as it really does help this channel out. And without further ado, let's begin. For this first video, it's only logical to start with the first film in the series, 2004's Shaun of the Dead. The zombie film is nothing particularly new, especially not by 2004. However, what hadn't really been done before was a zombie film set in North London. This influence came from Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright's own life experiences, where the pub in the movie, the Winchester, is being based upon a real pub in Highgate, which at the time was called the Shepherd and is now called the Boogaloo Pub, should any Brits out there want to go and visit it. The influences certainly don't stop there, because even the name of the landlords in the film's pub are the same as the names of the landlords at the Shepherd at the time. As Simon Pegg has explained, the central influence behind this film came from two main sources. Firstly, an episode of the British TV comedy Spaced, which was directed by Wright and starred Pegg and Jessica Hines, as well as featuring Pegg's longtime co-star and friend Nick Frost. There's an episode in this show in which Pegg's character, Tim, is so high that he believes he's actually in Resident Evil 2, a video game based around zombies that he's playing in the episode. They enjoyed shooting this scene so much that it gave them the desire to make a zombie movie. The second influence was that Simon Pegg and Nick Frost both frequented the pub The Shepherd on an all too regular basis, which was much to the dismay of Edgar Wright.
That really at the time was fairly autobiographical. Nick Frost and I, who played Ed, were ensconced in a pub in Highgate called The Shepherds, where we spent much of our time, to the disappointment of our then girlfriend Edgar Wright, who used to try and get us to go into town and go to the Groucho Club and places like that where celebrities hung out. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to stay in the pub. And my girlfriend at the time, Maureen, who is now my beautiful wife for 13 years, she also was trying to get us to leave. And we didn't want to. So we wrote a whole film about it and added zombies.
So from those two influences, Shaun of the Dead, now one of the most iconic zombie films of all time, was born. But what exactly makes this movie so good? Why does it work so well? The answer is quite simple, because it was made with love and a deep passion for filmmaking. This movie, and by extension the trilogy as a whole, really play into Wright and Pegg's own characters. Everything, down to them choosing the records that Shaun and Ed throw at the zombies to the use of Queen in the bar fight sequence. They're reflections on their own personalities and tastes. I once heard the sentiment that to be successful as a YouTuber, what you have to lean into is not just the niche, but yourself. Because other people can talk about the same niche as you, but no one else will approach that niche in the way that you do if you truly let your own personality bleed into your work. And I believe the same sentiment is true for art in general. In this case, filmmaking. This movie isn't trying to be anything other than the wild creativity of Wright and Pegg. And that's exactly why it works. Because they are such massive film fans, they're not creating works with a corporate agenda in mind. They're creating works that they themselves would geek out over and watch, even if they had nothing to do with them. That is why this movie works. It is their own personal imagination being made into a movie, and that gives this film a very authentic feel, because it's trying to be nothing more than something that they would enjoy. And unsurprisingly, by writing and creating as fans of film, they create a movie that film fans love. This manifests itself in both big and small ways within the film. For instance, during the film's action sequences, the sound design often includes swooping noises. This is done as a little nod to the use of swooping noises in Jackie Chan films during their fight sequences. Edgar Wright is a huge fan of those films, and therefore they influence his own work. In fact, sound is a very big element of Edgar Wright movies in general. A lot of effort goes into the way he uses sound, sometimes for no other reason than to create something that's very visually and audibly satisfying. For instance, note how when David is flipping the switches on the fuse box, it's in time with the music. Or how Shaun, Ed, and Liz hit the zombified landlord John in time with the music. It's actually a very clever story as to how they did that. They couldn't have the Queen song playing aloud while shooting the scene in the film for audio reasons that I don't fully understand to do with filmmaking. So instead, they used earbuds so the actors could hear the music and hit in time with the beats in the song. Wright's matching of music and image is something that re-emerges in even his more recent works like 2017's Baby Driver, where in the opening car chase, the car moves at times in line with the music. The film's sound design also utilizes a lot of diegetic sounds. In filmmaking, diegetic sound refers to sound that originates from within the film's world. So an obvious example of sound from this world would be Don't Stop Me Now by Queen in the bar scene, but a less obvious one would be the sounds of the slot machine, which are actually present throughout the background in a lot of the film's sound design. Don't believe me? Take a listen to this. It's a very clever detail that most viewers won't even ever pick up on. But what this does is act as a subconscious cue to the audience about the relevancy of the Winchester, where the film's slot machine is shown to be. Diegetic sound is a way of world building, giving the audience a deeper understanding and feel for the story and its locations. For instance, if you ever watched Game of Thrones, the music differs depending on where in the realm a scene is taking place, with distinct motifs and instruments for the north and King's Landing in the south, for instance. These differences help establish the different feel of the different locations. Now, in having the sound of the slot machine throughout Shaun of the Dead, the world of the film is constantly being anchored back to the Winchester, thus revealing that the Winchester is at the center of this world, which it is for Shaun and Ed, a point this film continually makes. This film also does something very clever with ideas around the zombie and zombification, which raise some really intriguing thematic ideas. Now, what is a zombie? Now, this seems like there's an obvious answer to this in this film. It's the living dead. However, the film makes some very interesting comparisons between the film's actual zombies and modern life. Shaun himself is stuck in life, stuck in the same job, same house, same people he's known for years, and inhabits the same pub over and over and over again. His life is monotony. This is showcased through his general dispassion as performed by Simon Pegg. If you think about it, what does a zombie normally do? A zombie usually does the same thing over and over and over again, whether it be wandering around aimlessly or attacking someone in the same manner over and over again. In other words, Zombies live monotonous lives too, even more so. They're not dead, but they're not alive either. And the same can be said for Shaun too. He's not really living, he's just aging. He's in the same place, with the same people, doing the same things, just slowly getting older. This is ultimately why Liz wants to break up with him in the first act of the film, because Shaun doesn't seem to want to change. He's stuck, living aimlessly, wandering like the very zombies they run from later in the film. The film makes endless comparisons between the living and the living dead, like the two scenes where Shaun wakes up in the morning and goes to work. The first being pre zombie apocalypse, and the second being during the zombie apocalypse. There are differences in how the scenes are designed. Mainly, there's more rubbish and damage around him. But that's really it. He walks in the same way, observing nothing around him, living out of habit rather than in the present moment. So much so that he even fails to realize there's a zombie apocalypse going on at first. These two scenes in tandem are genius, because in shooting them in the same way and changing very little, it emphasizes this point about how Shaun's existence is just as zombified as it would be if he were a zombie. Likewise, the end of the film makes a subtle jab at the tedium of modern life by having zombies work in things like shopping centers, appearing on reality TV, and generally being integrated into society to some degree. What happens to Ed at the end of the film is the most clear example of this. After becoming a zombie, he still plays video games with Shaun, only now, instead of in the living room, he's in the shed chained up so that he can't eat anyone. Likewise, at the end of the film, Shaun's life returns to almost the same as it was before, only now it's with Liz as they sit on the sofa watching TV and going to the Winchester. He got what he wanted, a simple life, albeit a zombified one. Other things I really like about this movie are a few of its very clever shots. I really like how they use the translucent windows and blinds to create a little bit of extra creepiness around the zombies by using their silhouettes in certain shots. I also love the fence gag in all three of these movies. Hot Fuzz has my favourite of the trilogy, but more on that next time. I like it because it does something silly with that classic action film trope of jumping over fences. Again, it's another example of how, as fans of film, Wright and Pegg are able to come up with a way to lovingly mock the tropes of the films they're fans of. Another thing is that there are some genuinely heartfelt moments in this film, albeit brief ones. They're held out just long enough to maybe make you feel something, but never too long to shift the tone of this film away from it being a comedy. This is something I find a lot of modern films struggle with, like 2022's Thor's Love and Thunder, which undercuts any of its more serious moments with humour far too soon. The audience needs a moment for far more tragic moments to sink in, and in this film, the death of Shaun's mum and Philip are some notable examples of this, once again played very well by Simon Pegg. I must say, his range as an actor is very impressive. His three characters in this trilogy alone are all distinctly different, but again, I'll return to this in more depth in my The World's End video, which will be part 3 of this series. And finally, keep an eye out for more reoccurring motifs in this movie that I haven't mentioned here. This is a prominent feature in much of Wright's work. The more you rewatch these films, the more you find. And that's something that I love about these films, is that they're incredibly rewatchable because of how many details are crammed into them. Overall then, Shaun of the Dead is an excellent parody of a zombie movie which has enough thematic and emotional depth to balance out its witty sense of humour. It's no surprise then that this movie has become an all-time classic in the zombie movie genre. So that was my take on Shaun of the Dead. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do like and subscribe so you can be notified when the next video in this series is out. It'll likely be amongst other reviews and releases, as I've got The Boys Season 4 and House of the Dragon Season 2 to cover shortly, but the next two longer form videos I'm making will be the next two parts in this Cornetto Trilogy series. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.